Mystery Monday number 15. A cash transfer at the Good Eats Diner. A dirty green Chevrolet sedan pulled off the highway into the parking lot of the Good Eats Diner and rolled to a stop in a jetsam of takeout wrappers and emptied ashtrays. The car looked tired. So did the two detectives in the front seat. The driver's head drooped. His passenger was curled into the corner of the seat, snoring softly. It was that kind of day. A sudden pre-dawn thaw that had turned the crisp winter air into a gray, clammy mist that hung thickly over the copse of evergreens behind the little restaurant. It curled along the snowbank surrounding the parking lot and left its dampening mark on people, buildings, and cars. No one felt up to moving too fast. Staff Sergeant John W. Ford stared glumly at the Good Eats Diner. The ramshackle little restaurant seemed to stare right back. Although any dignity the building might have once had was now subverted by its desperate need for paint and by the unfortunate malfunction of its neon tube sign, which announced "Goots" to anyone more than a few steps away. As Ford reached to turn off the ignition, his partner reacted in an overloud voice. "Not here. What do you think I am, Plastic Man? I can't get the door open." Bill Seeley was awake and riding a full-blown early morning mood. John Ford looked at him uncomprehendingly. He had been listening to Seeley for over 20 years and knew the bark meant nothing, but he couldn't understand what his partner was bothered about. "The door!" Seeley glared at Ford and jerked his thumb at the passenger window. "The door won't open. We're jammed against a snowbank. I can't get out." "Unless you want to question this turkey yourself, park over there." Without a word, or even the slightest sign that the exchange was anything but normal, John Ford moved the gear lever up to reverse, waited patiently for the clunk, then backed into the spot Bill Seeley had indicated. "What about some breakfast?" Seeley asked in an entirely pleasant voice. "We're here anyway." "In there?" It wasn't John Ford's turn to react. "You'd really eat in there?" Okay, Seeley backed off. Where to eat and what to eat was something he never pressed with his partner. "At least we can have coffee, can't we?" "Here, we'll take in our own cups." Seeley opened the glove compartment and took out a pair of plastic spill-proof mugs that looked like they might have come from the Good Eats Diner in the first place. But John Ford was not listening. He was staring. From the new parking space there was a good view of the Locke's armored car vehicle that had brought them here on this early morning visit. Though all the details were not yet available, this robbery was promising to be one of the biggest cases in both of their long careers. Just over 6 hours before, at 1:10 a.m., Locke's had reported its bank service vehicle had failed to respond to the regular 15-minute radio check. By 2 a.m., it had been confirmed as missing, along with $350,000 in cash. At 2:15 a.m., an all-points bulletin had alerted every police force in the immediate area. Only 2 hours after that, Ford and Seeley were listening to a highway patrol officer relay the information she had received from the night cook at the Good Eats Diner. It was this man they had come to see. "That's got to be the truck," John Ford said, almost in a whisper. Seeley had forgotten the mugs in his hands. "Look how they parked," he said. "So neat and straight and out of the way, just like your average law-abiding citizen." "Yeah," Ford replied, almost to himself. "But then they are your average law-abiding citizens, or at least they were, from what we know so far anyway. Two of them have worked for Locks for over 10 years. The woman is an 8-year veteran. Who'd think they would do something like this?" "Must have been the cash," Seeley offered. "I don't know how long you can drive around with all that dough before being tempted. I wouldn't be surprised if—" "That's got to be him," John Ford interrupted. "Who?" Seeley wanted to know. "Where?" "Over there." Ford pointed to a very tall, thin man who had just come out of the restaurant. He had a gray parka pulled over himself, almost hiding his smidged apron that hung below it to his knees. "He's coming over here, too," Ford continued. "Let's get out." He opened the door quickly and stood in the softening snow. Bill Seeley turned to duplicate the move, then realized he was still holding the mugs. He dropped them on the seat, got out of the car, and walked over to the driver's side to stand with his partner. "You're the cops, right?" The man kept walking toward them and drew back his lips like in a fox-like grin, showing teeth that rarely, if ever, had felt toothpaste. His hair was extremely long, but only on one side, and from just above his ear it was combed over to the top of his head to cover a spreading pate. He needed a shave, and, as though to fill out the picture, his night-long beard and thinning hair had absorbed so many rising clouds from the deep fryer that even in the dull, foggy air the greasy shine was impossible to ignore. Bill Seeley looked at the mugs lying on the front seat and shuddered. He held out his badge with his right hand, precluding any possibility of shaking hands. John Ford did the same. I knew it. The man shook his head and laughed to himself. I always know cops. You guys stick out. Somehow you always look different from regular people. Ford and Seeley glanced at each other. After many years of working together, they had learned to communicate with the shift of an eyebrow, and the slightest change of expression, or even an intake of breath. In the glance, they agreed to deal with this one rapidly as possible and get out. Mr. Hicks, you're the night cook. John Ford was being smoothly professional. And you're the man who saw the three people from the Lock's armored car come into the parking lot this morning. The cook nodded. His grin grew wider, and he nodded again. Right where you see her? He pumped his index finger at the armored car. Ford and Seeley exchanged another glance. They had both noted the dirt on Hicks's hands. This time it was John Ford who looked at the coffee mugs in the front seat. They backed her in, all neat, pretty, and straight, right where you see her. Then, just like I told that lady cop, the Jeep pulls up, a 4x4 by the look of her. Anyway, they gets out, tosses these bags on the back, and then get off down the highway. Just like I told the lady cop. She said you'd be here. That's how come I was looking for you. There's another way of recognizing cops, too. Y'all can never just once... You never can tell just once what it is you've seen. You've always got to tell it to another cop all over. Guess that's 'cause you guys all got bad memories, eh? His voice broke off in a cackle of laughter. Bill Seeley cut him short. If you can see that well in the dark, then why don't you know the license number? Hick's jaw twitched as he ground his teeth. The laughter had stopped and the grin was gone. I wasn't looking for no license number. What I want to do is check license numbers for you. What do I want to check license numbers for you? I'm no cop. John Ford leaned on the hood of his Chevrolet hard enough to make the metal pop. It broke the brief tension that had developed. What we want to know, he said to Hicks, is how you could see all of this so well at 4 a.m.? Were you out here in the lot? Hicks put his fingers to his ear and then ran them over his head through the strands of hair. You see those overhead lights? He said, pointing at it with a grabby finger. Mercury vapor. Had 'em put in last year. There's nothing in this parking lot. I can't see when they're going on. My fryer's sideways in the main window there. When that bunch pulled in this morning, I had 4 orders of B&E going. No time for license numbers. He glared maliciously at Seeley. But with these lights, I can see people breathing. And like I said, this Jeep pulls up, they toss in these bags, and off they go. Couldn't have been more than half a minute. The glance that passed between Seeley and John Ford was a little longer this time. Both of them even nodded slightly just before Seeley went to the rear door of the car and opened it. Ford pointed to the door. A little ride, Mr. Hicks. Call it a government treat. We're going to go back to the station for a longer visit until you can tell us a better version of this story. So the question is, what have John Ford and Bill Seeley ascertained to undermine Hicks's credibility?